And this is where I think the big catch-22 is, because most people are saying, I can't afford to get help. I can't afford to take out help. But the reality is you can't afford not to. Business takes investment. Like, period. You cannot, and I think that now in this world, we pay for software, right? And that's almost the only bit of investment that we will allow ourselves to put into our business when we're first starting out. We'll pay for the hosting on whatever platform, we'll pay for our, credit card processing or whatever, to payment processing. But in order to grow your business, and when I say grow business, I mean not be in a feast or famine cycle in your business, okay, service providers. Have you been running your business like a true business, or does it feel more like running a sorority? So this is a conversation that I just had with one of my business besties, Jilly. We do a mastermind every week where we kind of hold each other accountable, which is a huge shout out for having women leaders and business leaders and founders in your community that you can kind of like hold each other accountable and unload all of the challenges that you're facing as an entrepreneur. That's what I have with Jilly. So big shout out to Jilly of Baby Sleep Made Simple. Her business is fantastic. But we were discussing the idea of, how do you really step into the shoes of CEO in your business? And this is something that I feel is almost like a cliched phrase. I've heard again and again and again. And yesterday I was giving a workshop with the self-made community. Self-made is Britt Morin, who's a fantastic entrepreneur, unbelievably accomplished. And now she is a venture capitalist. Just unbelievable, right? She built this business called Brit & Co., and she has a community called Self-Made. So I was teaching a workshop inside Self-Made yesterday, and the workshop was all about team. And sometimes when I'm giving workshops, when I'm really passionate about something, I get really fired up, and my intensity level gets extremely high. And the workshop I was giving was about team. So we had about 100 people register for the workshop, tons of female entrepreneurs across business and product. And my whole presentation was about how do you really organize your team? How do you build a lean ROI-driven marketing team? How do you get the most out of them? And so I came in with some expectations that a lot of the women, not all, but the majority of the women on the call would have some help in their business, right? And that could mean, a virtual assistant or a social media manager. So I asked the question, I said, who do you have helping you in your business? And the resounding response was nobody. I'm running my business solo. I'm a solopreneur. I'm doing it all myself. And I became so passionate about explaining to these founders that there's no way that you could build a sustainable, thriving business and have the consistent revenue that you want and need to, run your life, contribute to, a household if you're part of a partnership, or help to feed your children and pay for things. And you can't build a sustainable business on your back alone. It's just because there's simply too much to do. And so I was thinking about this phrase as I was talking about it with Jilly this morning about how do you step into the shoes of CEO? And it's this cliched phrase. We hear it, we understand what it means, but I've been pondering the idea of, it's not understanding what that phrase means. It's really a feeling. It's feeling like you are actually the CEO of your business. And I know we have a lot of real CEOs of funded companies that listen to this podcast, but we also have a lot of solopreneurs. And if you're a solopreneur, I want you to hear this. It's fine to be a solopreneur for, a couple months as you're trying to figure out what are your offers and trying to close your first sales and really, figuring out, your systems. It's totally fine to do it on your own for a couple months. But if you have been on your own without really a solid team for years, you are doing yourself a huge disservice. And one of the things I was particularly fired up about is because I've had an incredible opportunity to work with unbelievably accomplished founders, both men and women. And I can tell you a through line to the million, multi-million, and even billion-dollar businesses that have been built by the founders that I work with is they do not have that mentality that they need to do everything themselves. And not once they started gaining, earning enough money to afford to hire people. And this is where I think the big catch-22 is, because most people are saying, I can't afford to get help. I can't afford to take out help. But the reality is you can't afford not to. Business takes investment. Like, period. You cannot, and I think that now in this world, we pay for software, right? And that's almost the only bit of investment that we will allow ourselves to put into our business when we're first starting out. We'll pay for the hosting on whatever platform, we'll pay for our, credit card processing or whatever, payment processing. But in order to grow your business, and when I say grow business, I mean not be in a feast or famine cycle in your business, okay, service providers. Because I've worked with incredible founders, and I've worked with lovely people as well who have had businesses for 10 or 20 years that still are in the feast and famine cycle of their business because they have not invested in marketing support and sales support. Okay? As the founder and owner, CEO of your business, you cannot be running the business, doing the bulk of the marketing, and doing all of the sales yourself forever. It's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. And when you start to invest in those pieces of your business, yes, it is money up front. Yes, you're going to have to get that support. And most times people don't come into your business and they start, getting back their ROI the next day. And it's just not, especially salespeople. Salespeople will need to get onboarded. They're going to have to really, understand the business and understand what to say. There is, for any real company that hires salespeople, there's usually a grace period where you're not really expecting them to be driving, that revenue on day 2 or 3, right? So I'm just telling you this because it is an investment. And in the beginning, we have, our time is maybe the only thing we can invest, right? So we invest our time. But the problem is people invest their time for too long. One book that's really important to read, and if you can even just get the Cliff's Notes version of it because it's just such an importantly simple concept. The book, Who Not How. This is something as a CEO and business leader, you, me, everyone, we should be internalizing. The most successful founders that I have worked with, and I'm talking about founders that have built, as I mentioned, unicorn companies, they never come in with the attitude of, I need to learn how to do email marketing perfectly. I need to learn how to, create the best content on Instagram. No, they build teams, and then the team builds the business. And so if you're dissatisfied with where you are in your business right now, chances are it's because you have not taken the leap to make proper investments in getting the right people to help you grow the business. The only function that you really should be responsible in your business is as the leader, as the visionary, right? And you need to have all of the other smaller tasks, the time sucks, all of those things taken off your plate because actually, we talk a lot in like consulting world about what are your $10,000 tasks versus your $10,000 tasks. And, your $10 tasks are, managing your calendar and cleaning out your inbox or maybe, doing a design on Canva or something like that. Yes, we realize, it's $10 tasks. We can easily pay someone else to do it. But I think that the reframe is not that those little tasks are actually $10 tasks. That's what they're worth. I think those $10 tasks are actually negative $10,000 tasks. Because for every hour that you're spent doing those $10 tasks, you're actually losing tens of thousands of dollars by not working on your highest value tasks, which is building those partnerships, like big partnerships that are going to turn into big sales, exponential sales, right? Networking, where you're going to make those connections that are going to turn into big sales, exponential sales, right? Doing high-level strategic work, speaking, getting in front of audiences, getting PR opportunities. These are the types of actions that 10x your effort, right? And for every hour that you spend just toiling away on the bullshit, you're losing money and you're losing opportunity. And I speak to this so passionately because it's something that I have done myself for many, many years. I've done this myself for many, many years. Even though I've taught something different, right? Even though I know in my mind that, working on those $10 tasks are not what I should be doing, I, even to this day, find myself, and I have an executive assistant, I have a beautiful team that supports me, but I still, in practice, right? It's very hard to execute. That's why we need to develop a discipline and systems around us and habits that are going to work in our favor. It's like if you're trying to go on a diet, right? If you're trying to lose weight, what's like the most effective thing you can do for yourself is like, don't buy the cookies, don't buy the ice cream, don't buy the crackers, right? Don't have them available to you. So when you go into the kitchen, you only have good choices to make, right? In a business sense, that means what are you going to do when you start your day? How do you start your day? Do you open up your email, right? It's right in front of you, just like the cookies. You'll get caught, you'll get stuck, you'll blink your eyes and an hour and a half will pass by because you're trying to find that document. You got to find that guy, but the PDF's in the wrong format and it's not editable and this, that, and the other. You've wasted half the day now. And I've done this. I know this. I feel it. And you end the day feeling guilty, feeling shitty, and then you end the quarter saying, I didn't get to the goals. I didn't get the things done. But impossible to get the things done if you don't give yourself the time to do it. And in order to have the time to do it, you have to have the discipline, right? It's not just about putting everything, organized in your journal and making sure you have all of your goals outlined perfectly. It's about what do you do when you sit your ass in the chair each and every day? What does your calendar look like, right? Are you setting yourself up for success? Do you even have time to do the creative strategic work, right? And for so many of us that call ourselves CEOs and founders of our businesses, we're really just like the hardest working employee. We're not business owners. We have to apply discipline to the way that we conduct ourselves because that is the one factor that will change everything. That will manifest whatever you want in your life and business. But you have to be it. You have to live it. Okay, again, Sunira Madani, incredibly accomplished founder. She lives that vision. I've seen it. I've worked next to her. Dan Martell, he lives that vision. I've seen it. I've worked next to him. I've worked for both of these incredible entrepreneurs that if you spend any time, reading the books they wrote or listening to them on their podcasts and just the incredible success and monetary success they've had, I can see the dichotomy between how they show up and how I showed up for many years in my business. I showed up as the worker bee. And it's not because I didn't know how to be the leader. If we really look at what's underneath that, it's that I don't feel like I deserved to be that leader. And I think this is where so many of us, all of us, women, are stuck because we feel like we need to prove X, Y, and Z, LMNOP until we're able to be the leader, right? That we can be that CEO, that we really are good enough to get to the next level. And what I can tell you from sort of making that crossover, right? I don't think I'm ever maybe any better in terms of how I execute for clients and my systems, all those things. Between now and 5 years ago, I don't think that my I haven't gotten exponentially smarter in how I execute. I do a very good job of the frameworks that I built, following, systemizing, and delivering for clients. The difference is that, 5 years ago, I decided that I was good enough to step into being a leader and not having to do anything myself. I just made the decision. And like an actor, right? I created a vision for the CEO that I wanted to be and show up with from these beautiful examples that I had working with these incredible founders. I built this vision for myself. I stepped into that vision. And that could be as simple as like, what are the clothes you wear? What are the things you eat? What does your schedule look like? Who are the people you surround yourself with? It's just a decision. It's just a decision. But if you don't make that decision and you continue to be the how of your business, how are we going to do that? I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to learn it, right? I'm going to execute it. Or maybe you get people that are way, way, way too cheap, that you have to handhold way, way, way too much, right? It becomes this like self-perpetuating cycle where you hire folks that are just like grossly inexperienced because you do not want to invest 1 cent into your business, right? You can't afford it. You can't afford it, right? I've said this to myself for many, many years. But then I see you guys at networking events and at conferences, and you say, oh, it's just so hard to find good people because no one's good. I feel like I can't trust anyone to be forward-facing with my clients. I can't trust. And it's because you don't even know what good looks like. You've never even had good come into your life to see that it exists. But I can tell you, I have found fantastic people on Upwork, on Fiverr, for example, but people that I took a very, detailed time to hire and to train and to build a relationship. And some of the folks that I have met on Upwork, I tell you, I've been working with for 7 years and have become the most trusted, loyal, growth-minded champions of me and my business. So they do exist, right? But I think like the point of this whole episode is really the mindset shift. The mindset shift, because again, it's like, may sound like bullshit, but at the basis of it, right, the success you want, the freedom and ease in your business that you want, all comes with the mindset that you bring to the table. And so I would invite you to ask yourself, these are 3 questions that a dear friend and life coach, Joe Metcalf, shout out to Joe, who is the leader of a local community here called Miami Made. So yesterday we had our Miami Made Thrive Together monthly meeting. It happens every Tuesday here in Miami. But he was working us through some reflections. He asked us 3 questions that I thought were really poignant. And so I'm gonna have you get a pen out. You can answer these questions yourself. The first is, think about your vision for the year. So back at the beginning of the year when you were doing your vision casting, right? You really were like, okay, 1 year from now, this is all that I want to accomplish in my business, okay? What was that vision? Write it down, okay? The next question is, what is the number one thing that you can do to bring that vision into reality? And if I were you, or this is how I did it, if I were you, I would answer quickly. Don't think too much, because oftentimes that gut response is sort of your intuition. So answer that quickly. What is the number one thing that you can do to bring that vision into reality? And the third question is, why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you doing that? And when I was answering these questions, we went to breakout groups, but a lot of the folks that were in the group I was broken out with, it came down to a people issue. And when we break out the people issues is these cycles of, I know I need to kind of offload this. I know that I need, in order to grow my business to scale or to get consistent revenue, I need to hire this person. I need to find this help. And they hadn't done it because of fear, afraid of wasting money, afraid of wasting time. But the reality is that you have to take those chances, because the other alternative is that you never grow and you never get to the next level. And I can tell you this from experience in my own business, and I am definitely not a risk taker when it comes to my money. I'm not a gambler at all. But I've made tens of thousands of dollars of mistakes in my business, in investments that have not gone my way, from hiring, folks to do X, Y, and Z, to, getting an agency or, professional service that didn't work out, or whatever, getting software, trying something. I've made these errors, but the world has a funny way of working where, in that mistake, quote unquote, and I think there are no mistakes, right? Only learning, right? There's no failure, only learning. But it all balances out. So even if you get into you make a wrong decision, right? You make an investment that ends up being the wrong decision. I tell you, you're going to figure it out. You'll be able to par down your expenses and sort of get back to where you were and pay yourself back. Or if you go into a bit of a debt, you'll be able to get yourself out of the debt. Nothing is catastrophic. But, when you hear these amazing stories like at How I Built This or whatever, there's always one theme where it's like these billion-dollar companies always have these stories of these massive failures that were catastrophic, that were just devastating monetarily. And those folks were able to pull themselves out of it, turn it around. Because when the stakes are really high, guess what happens? You figure it out. And I think that we need to come with more of that energy. It doesn't mean that I want you to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, throwing it out the window. But you can certainly be making smart measured investments into the people, the how of how you're getting to that next level in your business. And I promise you that even if it is a fail, quote unquote, it won't be a fail, because it's going to bring you to the next thing and the next thing. That's going to bring you to the next answer. And another bit of advice that is a huge theme if you listen to any successful entrepreneurs is this. It's that, oftentimes they say, I'm not the smartest in the room, right? I just didn't give up. And the only failure is giving up. So if you find yourself scared to make an investment, to get to that next level, to get the help that you need in your business so you can actually grow, if you're feeling scared, try to flip the switch. Try to, in your brain, and think, no matter what happens, I'm going to land on my feet. No matter what happens, I'm going to figure it out, right? Even if this completely fails, I'm going to be armed with the knowledge, with everything that I learned from this experience. And I'm going to grow and I'm going to get better, because we're always getting better. We're always learning and we're always growing. So get out there, get that help in your business, and then come back here next week, because I'm going to give you some real tactical advice and exactly what you need help on when it comes to your marketing. See you next week.